Jobs met his oldest daughter just a few days after she was born. He was 23 years old at the time. He wouldn't say for sure that Lisa, the name of an early Apple computer, was named after her. Even make the bad times last longer so I can understand what they meant to me and get through them. Steve Jobs, co-founder of Apple and a hero in the tech world, was very successful by coming up with new ideas. In the beginning, he worked with Steve Wozniak. Together, they came up with new ideas that made them famous and successful, making them legends in the field of technology. But he kept secrets and had trouble with his relationships, especially with Lisa, his daughter. It was hard for them to be together, and they were often turned down. Lisa has confirmed what we already knew, that she had problems with her father. She is now 46 years old. What caused their relationship to get tense, and what did she say? Come with us as we reveal these facts. Now that we're ready to start, let's look at Steve Jobs' early life and early job in innovation. Abel Fattah, John Jandali, and Joanne Schiebel had Steve Jobs on February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California. She met Schiebel, an American Catholic, at the University of Wisconsin. Jandali was a Muslim from Syria. Born to college students, they gave him up for adoption when he was a kid. Paul and Clara Jobs raised him in Mountain View, California. John Dali, Steve's real father, was from Syria, and Joanne Schiebel, his mother, was half German and half Swiss. Steve got back in touch with his real mother and his sister Mona when he was an adult. Mona found their real father. He ran a restaurant that tech workers liked. Steve met his real father by chance and shook hands with him, but it didn't change how he felt about him. Because of Jandali's faith, Schiebel's father didn't like the couple. Schiebel set up a closed adoption when she got pregnant and then went to San Francisco to give birth. Schiebel wanted college graduates to adopt her son, but the first couple changed their minds when they found out the baby was a boy. Paul and Clara Jobs then took Steve in as their own child. Paul Jobs was born in the US but has German roots. He worked as a plumber and then joined the US Coast Guard. Clara Hagopian, an American with Armenian roots, was his wife. They got married in 1946. When they moved to San Francisco, Paul got a job as a recovery agent and Clara got a job as a bookkeeper. After having trouble getting pregnant, they adopted Steve in 1955. Schiebel at first refused to sign the adoption papers because he was worried that Paul and Clara would not be able to go to college. But they said they would pay for Steve's college, which made her change her mind. Steve's parents took him to a Lutheran church when he was a kid. Clara later said that she was afraid to love Steve when he was young because she didn't want to lose him. Steve knew that Clara had some doubts at first, so he told her over and over that Paul and Clara were his parents. He only talked about his real parents as his genetic donors. Paul Jobs, Steve Jobs' dad, had many jobs, one of which was a machinist. He took Patricia in as his own child in 1957 and moved to Mountain View, California in 1959. Paul gave Steve a workbench in his basement so that he could share his love of fixing things. Jobs admired how well his father could make things and liked helping him. Jobs, on the other hand, had a hard time in regular classes where he often fought authority and behaved badly. His father never told him off. Instead, he blamed the school for not pushing his smart son. Jobs skipped 5th grade and went to Crittenden Middle School instead, where he was picked on. He said he would quit school if his parents didn't move him to a different school. The Jobs family bought a new house in Los Altos, California in 1967. This let Steve go to Cupertino School District. This house would later be where Apple Computer got its start. Bill Hewlett, co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, was Jobs' first call when he was 13. He asked for computer parts. Jobs became interested in technology after working for Hewlett over the summer. Jobs met Steve Wozniak at Homestead High School, where he met Bill Fernandez. Jobs and Wozniak were both interested in tech. During high school, Jobs' hobbies grew to include reading and music. He joined the Fringe and let his hair grow long. Jobs went to Stanford University's Student Union and saw Wozniak at the University of California, Berkeley, in 1971. He also worked on a project for an outside film. Wozniak made a blue box that could hack into phone networks and make calls for free. Jobs helped sell them and split the money that came in. Jobs learned from the blue box that working with electronics could be fun and make money. He thought about how it set the stage for Apple. Jobs said that taking LSD in his senior year was the best moment of his life. Steve Jobs and his girlfriend Chris Ann Brennan rented a house after high school before he went to Reed College. Even though his parents were having money problems, Steve Jobs started at Reed College in Portland, Oregon in September 1972. He liked the way Reed's place felt. Jobs became friends with Robert Friedland, who was head of the Reed student body. Christopher Ann Brennan, his girlfriend, stayed with him. Jobs was interested in Eastern mysticism, which was becoming more common at the time. People with a lot of influence, like Timothy Leary, Richard Alpert, and Gary Snyder, went to Reed College. These educational meetings made people think about the truths of life. Like a lot of college students, Jobs read important books like Be Here Now and Diet for a Small Planet, but Jobs quit Reed after only one term without telling his parents. He didn't want them to waste their money on an education that didn't seem to have any point. Jobs kept taking classes even after dropping out, including a calligraphy class given by Robert Palladino. This class later had an effect on how the Macintosh computer was made. In a 2005 speech at Stanford University's commencement, Jobs talked about what he did during this time. He slept on the floors of his friends' dorm rooms, collected Coke bottles for food money, and went to the nearby Hare Krishna Center once a week to get free meals. Jobs said that the most creative writing came from that calligraphy class. He stressed how important it is to pursue hobbies, even if they don't seem to have anything to do with your future. From a young age, Steve Jobs had a glimpse of being brilliant, but was his road of visionary thinking doomed to fail? And what has his daughter now said for sure? Check back to find out, his early work and the first things he came up with. From February 1974 to March 1974, Steve Jobs lived with his parents in Los Altos and looked for work. He was hired by Atari right away as a computer tech. A computer game called Pong was made by Steve Wozniak, who then gave Jobs the electronics board for it. Jobs was chosen by Atari because they thought he built the board. Jobs and Daniel Kautyke went to India in the middle of 1974 to visit Neem Karoli Baba's ashram and learn about spirituality. After Neem Karoli Baba's death, they found the ashram empty. After that, Jobs and Kauty went to Haidakhan Babaji's ashram. Jobs came back to the US before Kauty did after 7 months. He looked different now that he had shaved his head and was dressed in traditional Indian clothes. During this time, Jobs tried psychedelics like LSD, which he thought would change his life. He also spent some time in Oregon at the All One Farm commune. Steve Jobs and Chris Ann Brennan learned Zen Buddhism from Kobenchino Odegawa, a Zen master. Jobs went to the Tasajara Zen Mountain Center for meditation sessions. Jobs went back to work at Atari in 1975 and was told to make a circuit board for Breakout. He asked Wozniak to join, who improved the system and lowered the number of chips. Atari gave Jobs and Wozniak extra money for each chip they got rid of. But Jobs is said to have told Wozniak that they got less than what they were supposed to get. Jobs and Wozniak went to meetings of the Homebrew Computer Club, which was a step toward making and selling the first Apple computer. Jobs says that he was arrested in Eugene, Oregon in 1975 for not paying a speeding ticket. He said he was questioned because he was a minor with drugs on him, but that he was let go after paying a fine. Jobs' mental and professional path were shaped by these events. Working with Wozniak and studying Eastern religions set the stage for Apple's innovative way of doing things. Jobs' time at Atari and his trips to India changed the way he thought about design and technology. His work with Wozniak would soon change the whole computer business. Steve Wozniak finished creating the Apple I computer in March 1976 and showed it to Steve Jobs. Jobs suggested that it be sold. Wozniak was unsure at first, but in the end agreed. To start the Apple Computer Company on April 1, 1976, Jobs, Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne met at Jobs' parents' house. The plan began in Jobs' bedroom and then moved to the garage. Soon after, Wayne left, leaving Jobs and Wozniak as the main co-founders. The name Apple comes from something Jobs did in an apple field in Oregon. Jobs planned to charge $50 for each bare circuit board. Jobs and Wozniak both sold their Volkswagen vans to raise money for production. Paul Terrell, who sells computers, paid $500 each for 50 Apple I units that were already put together. There were about 200 Apple I computers made. Jobs was remembered by his neighbors as an unusual businessman. Larry Waterland, who has a PhD from Stanford, at first turned down Jobs' company idea. Daniel Kauty, who worked at Apple early on, remembers working in Jobs' kitchen and garage. Kautyke said that Wozniak would come by once a week with new code while Jobs worked on getting backers. Apple got some money from Mike Markula, a semi-retired Intel engineer, told Arthur Rock about Apple and got him to spend $60,000. Scott McNealy, co-founder of Sun Microsystems, said that Jobs broke Silicon Valley's glass age rule by being successful at such a young age. Apple's first president and CEO was Mike Scott, who Markula hired in February 1977. This made Jobs upset. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple together in 1976, and they made the first Apple computers. With the Apple I, they became famous and rich. Around this time, Steve and Chris Ann Brennan had a daughter named Lisa Brennan Jobs. The connection between Steve Jobs and Chris Ann Brennan got more complicated as his company, Apple, did better. Rod Holt offered Brennan a paid apprenticeship in October 1977 to make plans for Apple. Jobs thought she would be great at it because she was artistic. But Brennan wasn't sure, and she soon found out she was pregnant with Jobs' kid. When she told Jobs, he was very angry. He didn't want to talk about the baby. Brennan turned down the job offer and quit Apple. She moved to the all-in-one farm right before giving birth, and that's where she had Lisa on May 17, 1978. After their friend Robert Friedland called him, Jobs went to see the baby. Jobs helped choose the baby's name, Lisa, which he liked, even though they were not close. But he denied being the father in public. Jobs was going to name a new computer after their daughter, but Brennan didn't know that. He picked Lisa, but he came up with a different reason. Integrated software designed to hide what inspired them in the first place. After many years, Jobs told Walter Isaacson, who wrote his biography, that the computer was called after Lisa. Steve at first denied being the father, even though he and Lisa chose the name Lisa together. It's interesting that Apple's next computer, which came out a few years later, was called Apple Lisa, but Croissant never said it was okay to use their daughter's name. Steve and his team came up with a different reason. Local software design that works together. In 1996, Apple was having a hard time, and finishing its next operating system was crucial to its survival. Apple bought Next for $400 million in December 1996 after talks with B Inc. fell through. Steve Jobs went back to the company he helped start because of the deal. Jobs sent an email to employees in 2006 when Apple's market value topped L. Jobs was known for being able to persuade people, which he called the reality distortion field. This was clear at his keynote talks. Jobs was known for wearing black turtlenecks by Issey Miyake, 501 jeans by Levi's, and shoes by New Balance. Jobs got 7.5 million stock options in 2001, and they could be exercised at a price of $18.30 each. Investigations were started because of claims of backdating and not reporting taxable income. Jobs didn't know about the problems, according to an internal Apple review, and the options were returned in 2003 without being used. In 1978, when he was only 23, Steve Jobs had a net worth of more than $1 million. Forbes lists him as one of the youngest self-made millionaires at age 25. At that point, he had a net worth of $250 million. Jobs bought an apartment in Central Park, New York in 1982, but he never lived there. He worked with Builder and Pay for years to fix it up. Jobs persuaded John Sculley to quit Pepsi-Cola and become CEO of Apple. Sculley's business knowledge complemented Jobs' vision for new ideas. Jobs bought the Jackling House in 1984 and lived there for 10 years. He later rented it out and let it fall apart. In 2004, he got permission to tear down the house and build a smaller one in its place. Jobs took over the Macintosh project from Jeff Raskin in 1981. The Macintosh was based on Xerox PARC's graphical user interface, and it made its debut in 1984 with a famous Super Bowl ad. At an emotional Apple shareholders meeting, Jobs showed the Macintosh to a crowd of excited people. But poor performance and a lack of tools made sales go down. Jobs and Sculley had different ideas about where the company should go. Sculley liked computers with open architecture for schools and small companies. While Jobs worked on the Macintosh to compete with IBM PCs in the business world, the Macintosh section ran on its own and provided the same services twice. A lot of workers, including Wozniak, quit because the company changed its goal. By the beginning of 1985, IBM PCs were beating the Macintosh. Sculley remade Apple, which took away Jobs' power. Jobs wanted to fire Sculley, but he was faced and quit in the end. There are now 5 senior workers at Next. The Macintosh kept having problems after work left. When Microsoft made Windows, they said they would stop making Mac apps if they weren't given a license. Sculley agreed, which caused Apple trouble in the future. There were cheap IBM PC copies with graphical user interfaces that came out, which took away from the Macintosh's edge. Clones that ran on Windows ruled the market. As the 1980s came to an end, Apple could no longer stay away from the IBM clone business. The graphical user interface, which used to be Apple's strong point, became the norm. The day Jobs quit, Apple's past changed in a big way. After he left, Sculley took over running the company, but Apple's slide continued. The Macintosh and Jobs' willingness to try new things left a lasting impression that led to further technical progress. Beginning in October 2005, Bob Iger became CEO of Disney. He quickly worked to make things better with Steve Jobs and Pixar. Jobs and Iger announced that Disney would buy Pixar for $7.4 billion on January 24, 2006. Because of this, Jobs bought about 7% of Disney's stock, making him the company's biggest shareholder. This big stake was bigger than Michael Eisner's 1.7% stake and Roy E. Disney's 1% stake, who is related to the Disney family. Jobs joined Disney's board of directors and brought a unique point of view to the table. His Disney shares were given to the Stephen P. Jobs Trust, which is run by his wife Laureen after he died. In 2019, Iger said that many people had told him about Jobs' strong personality, but he thought Jobs was a good board member who rarely caused problems. Iger even thought that Jobs might have thought about combining Disney and Apple if he were still alive. Floyd Norman of Pixar said that Jobs was a mature and calm person who didn't get in the way of directors' creativity. Edwin Catmull, co-founder of Pixar, said that Jobs told him to be patient and explain his point of view until others got it. Before we get into the complicated relationship between Steve Jobs and his daughter Lisa Brennan Jobs, let's take a moment to look back at her unique early life. Her birthday is May 17th, and she was born at All One Farm, a commune run by Robert Friedland near Portland, Oregon. From 1972 to 1977, her parents, Chrisanne Brennan and Steve Jobs, were together and then broke up. Jobs, Brennan, and their friend Daniel Kotke shared a house near the Apple office after they helped start the company. This is when Brennan found out she was pregnant with Lisa. Jobs at first denied being pregnant, which made Brennan end the relationship and move to the All One Farm commune to give birth. Robert Friedland talked Jobs into only visiting 3 days after Lisa was born. Brennan and Jobs gave the child the name Lisa. Jobs was working on the Apple Lisa computer project at the same time. He later said that the name Lisa wasn't meant to be a reference to his daughter. Jobs did say, though, that the project was called after Lisa many years later. Jobs said in public that he wasn't Lisa's father, and Apple's team came up with another reason for the project's name, Local Integrated System Architecture. There was friction between Jobs and Brennan because of this denial. Chrisanne Brennan raised Lisa mostly by herself, with some money from Jobs here and there. It would take years to fix their troubled relationship. On the top of success, there are secrets that must be kept. Let's look into what Steve Jobs' daughter said. What does this new information mean for their relationship? Check back to find out. Steve and his daughter have a hard time getting along. The truth has come out. Lisa has written about her hard childhood and her confusing relationship with Steve now that she is an adult. She is honest about how she felt about being alone and abandoned in her book Small Fry. Her life shows a more complicated side of Steve Jobs. Lisa Brennan Jobs said that for the first 2 years, her father Steve Jobs wasn't very interested in her life. He didn't pay child support, so her mother was having a hard time making ends meet. This was in the early days of Apple, and Steve was totally committed to the business. Steve's attitude changed a little when a court-ordered DNA test showed that there was a 95% chance that he was the father. But he didn't become an active dad all of a sudden. He didn't visit Lisa until the court told him to pay child support. Lisa was 2 years old at the time. Steve paid more than the court ordered $385 a month in child support at the start of their troubled relationship. At the same time, Apple went public, and by the time he was 25, Steve was worth more than $200 million. The advanced Lisa computer came out in 1983 from Apple, and Steve Jobs was named Person of the Year by Time magazine. He said that 28% of American guys could be Lisa's father when asked about her. Steve was said to have kept Lisa's picture in his pocket and said he tried to help her because she didn't have a father. In her book, Lisa Brennan Jobs talks about how upset she is that Steve Jobs put making machines that changed the world ahead of raising her. Steve spent more time with Lisa after he left Apple in the mid-1980s and took her rollerblading, but they didn't talk much. Lisa could see how sad and distant her father was, but she wanted to connect with him. When Steve did well, he moved away, but when he failed, he got closer. Steve started Next after leaving Apple and gave money to Lucasfilm's computer animation company, which later became Pixar. As CEO of Pixar, Steve made groundbreaking movies like Toy Story and Finding Nemo, which showed how smart and creative he was as a businessman. In the meantime, Lisa and her mother had a hard time finding safe housing and had to move around a lot. Lisa split her time between living in luxury and living in poverty when Steve became interested. She went on holiday with him to his huge, lonely mansion and then went back to living in poverty with her mother. In one of her books, Lisa Brennan Jobs wrote about her time with Steve Jobs. She said that he was unreliable and would come and go from her life. His actions bothered and interested her. Steve was always changing his mind. One minute he was happy and full of energy, and the next he was mean and cold. He played guitar and sang to Lisa at home, but he also didn't pay attention to her. His inconsistencies were clear all over. Rich, but his pants have holes in them. Famous, but by himself. Because Steve was so smart, everyone could handle his quirks. Lisa said that he was nice sometimes. She and her mother did find their dream home, though. Steve bought it for himself and moved in with his new wife, Lorraine Powell. Steve married Lorraine and they had 3 children together. He was a perfectionist at work and in his home life. Lisa thought Steve's story was flawed because she felt like an unplanned mistake. In her younger years, Chrisanne, Lisa's mother, raised her while looking for security and often changing partners. Because of this, Chrisanne and Lisa got angry and fought violently. Steve told Lisa she had to move in with him and give his new family a chance. Lisa's relationships with her parents were complicated and made her feel bad. She figured out how to be in a relationship with Steve while dealing with his unpredictable behavior. She decided to live with Steve Jobs for 6 months, which meant she would not be able to see her mother, Chrisanne. Lisa was able to live with her father because of this choice, but she was also separated from her mother. Steve wasn't like most dads. Because he was a hippie, he didn't punish Lisa for smoking, and didn't think college was important because he never went. Steven didn't like it when Lisa got into Harvard. He wanted her to stay home and take care of her younger brothers. Steve was cheap with Lisa, even though he had a lot of money. He wouldn't buy her a new couch or fix her heating. At the same time, he bought himself new cars. Steve became CEO of Apple again in 1996, and he brought the company back to life with new items like the iMac, iPhone, iPad, iPod, and iPod and iTunes Store. People began to associate Steve's name with success. Lisa said she used her well-known last name to her advantage, like when she applied to college. But going to college also meant getting away from her bad relationship with Steve and her mother's problems. Steve couldn't forgive Lisa for putting school ahead of her family and stopping tuition payments. Lisa tried to get a grant but was turned down because of her well-known last name. Lisa Brennan Jobs finished college with the help of money from Steve Jobs' friends who looked out for her when Steve wasn't around. Lisa only saw her dad once a year as an adult, even though she was his first child. Steve officially admitted having 3 children, but not Lisa. But when he was told he had cancer, Lisa went to see him more often. She was with him in his last moments, and Steve told her he was sorry he wasn't there for her. Walter Isaacson's book says that Steve felt bad that he didn't work things out with Lisa. Steve said he couldn't picture himself as a dad when Lisa was born and tried to stay away. Lisa thought back on her childhood and thought about how lucky she was to have known Steve before he became famous. She loved remembering the fun things they did together, like roller skating and jumping on the trampoline. Lisa's autobiography is mostly about the hard times she had with Steve, like feeling rejected and overlooked. She thought she was the bad part of his story. Lorraine Powell Jobs, Steve's wife and Mona Simpson, Steve's sister, said Lisa's story was not true. In a joint statement, they said they were sorry and said Lisa's story was wrong. They said Lisa didn't accurately describe their memories. Steve Jobs' wife, Lorraine Powell Jobs, said that he loved Lisa and felt bad about not being there for her early life. Family time was also important to his other 3 kids. Lisa got a lot of money from Steve's will after he died. Jobs' wife, on the other hand, took care of most of his cash and legacy, which made them much richer. Lisa Jobs was ready to give billions of dollars to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, even though Steve Jobs and Bill Gates had a history of competing with each other. Steve Jobs was a complicated and difficult person, as shown by his daughter Lisa Brennan Jobs' accounts. His relationships were complex, and Lisa's story makes me wonder what was most important to him. Steve felt like the end of an age came too quickly in the middle of everything. How could he have died? Check back to find out. Steve Jobs' last few years. Steve Jobs was told he had pancreatic cancer in October 2003. In the middle of 2004, he told his staff that he had a rare growth that wasn't going to kill him. Jobs at first refused to go to the doctor and instead used traditional medicine for 9 months. Doctors all agreed that his diet wasn't good enough, and some thought that his choice to eat poorly hurt his chances of life. David Gorski, a cancer researcher, said that Jobs' different method might have slightly lowered his chances of survival. Barry Cassileth from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, on the other hand, said that Jobs' faith in alternative medicine most likely ended in his death. Walter Isaacson, a biographer, wrote that Jobs felt bad about putting off surgery. But he tried going vegan, getting acupuncture, and using herbal treatments instead. In the end, he had surgery in July 2004. Chemotherapy and radiation treatment were not used on Jobs. Tim Cook ran Apple while he was away. Jobs' wife, doctors, and Bob Iger were the only ones who knew that his cancer had come back in January 2006. Jobs hoped to see his son read at his 2010 high school graduation. At the 2006 Worldwide Developers Conference, Jobs' thin look made people worry about his health. Apple said he was in good health. Concerns like these came up after Jobs' 2008 address. Apple said that his appearance was caused by a usual bug, but other people said it was the Whipple procedure. In 2008, Bloomberg released Jobs' obituary by mistake, which spread health rumors. Jobs replied, "The reports of my death are greatly exaggerated using words from Mark Twain." Apple stated on December 16, 2008, that Phil Schiller would give the keynote speech at Macworld 2009, which brought up health concerns. Jobs said in January 2009 that he would be taking a 6-month leave because of health problems. Tim Cook took over as CEO. Jobs had surgery to get a new liver in April 2009. It was said that his outlook was good. Jobs turned down Tim Cook's offer to give him some of his liver. This action showed how much Cook cared about Jobs. Jobs' health problems and final liver transplant marked a tough time. His ability to lead and inspire new ideas continued to change Apple. When Jobs' health and work life collided, it made people wonder about his impact and Apple's future. Steve Jobs took his second sick leave from Apple on January 17, 2011. While Jobs took care of his health, Tim Cook ran the day-to-day business. Jobs went to a few events, like the launch of the iPad 2 and the WWDC address. He quit as CEO on August 24, 2011, saying it was because of his health. Jobs was made chairman of the board, and he chose Tim Cook to take over as his replacement. He kept working until 6 weeks before he died. Steve Jobs passed away at 3 p.m. on October 5, 2011. Because of problems caused by his pancreatic growth, He died at home with his family around him. His sister Mona Simpson said that he said, "Oh wow," 3 times before he died. 2 days after that, there was a private burial. To honor Jobs, Apple, Pixar, Disney, and Microsoft put up tributes and flags at half-staff. Apple set up a way for people to send sympathy emails. A private memorial event for Jobs was held on Apple's campus, and his family, co-workers, and famous people all came. On Apple's website, a movie was added. Jerry Brown, the governor of California, made October 16th Steve Jobs Day. Stanford University held a service to honor the person who died. As a goodbye gift, Jobs gave each person there a copy of the autobiography of a yogi. Steve Wozniak, Barack Obama, George Lucas, and Bill Gates all paid homage. Jobs is buried at Alta Mesa Memorial Park in a grave that isn't marked. His work continues to motivate and change technology. Did Lisa Brennan Jobs tell the truth about her relationship with her father? What do you think? Do you believe that everything she says is true? Leave your thoughts in the box below. Thanks for seeing this movie. We hope it was interesting for you. Remember to like and subscribe. You can watch the next movie on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity news. I'll see you there.